Everybody, and welcome back from the break. This is Tom Bechtold, your host from Secure World Digital. Up next, we have deep fakes in the wild and in court. This is a frame by frame, right? So we're talking deep fakes, big stuff happening constantly. We're hearing about it in the news, on social media and things. I invited one of our friends from the United States Secret Service, Jared Labato. He is a network intrusion forensics analyst, also known as NIFA within that organization. He knows a ton of stuff and is going to kind of guide us through a journey today on deep fakes, and we're going frame by frame in some instances. So, Jared Labato, welcome, sir. It's wonderful to have you here. The floor is yours.
Tom, it's good to be here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So we'll jump into it, and I start out these presentations with two slides. The first is a Red Queen race. It's a term I've really enjoyed because it comes from Alice in Wonderland, and it's the race with the Red Queen, and they're running as fast as they can just to stay in place. And the reason why I share this and the reason why I explain this is that what I'm showing you guys today, in 3 or 4 months, in maybe even a week, there's already been updates to this from the last time I spoke on this. So keep that in mind. I mean, the tech world in general is super, super fast, but specifically AI, it's even faster. So the iterations I've given of our AI presentation has been, we're probably on iteration 14 or 15 in the last year. The next slide that I bring up is this quote by Edward O. Wilson. He was a paleontologist, did a lot of work with ants. It's that the real problem with humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And I use that and I bring this up every single time because we as humans are very, very much still the same people we've always been. And if you look at the scandal and the wars that have gone on between, the Roman era into the 1800s to, the scandals that even plague modern politics, it's very much the same thing. And then we have these institutions which lag behind in technology. So the technology, the laws are constantly falling behind technology. And that's a big intersection where I work, is in the legal realm, right? And so now we take those emotions, we take those institutions, and now we supercharge it with this technology. And when you truly look how remarkable even the cell phone is, what we're looking at is essentially indistinguishable from magic. It's absolutely amazing. So these are some very high profile deepfake crimes that have happened rather recently. Attackers impersonated Marco Rubio to uncover government secrets. Essentially what they did is they spoofed his Signal account, which there's been some issues with Signal, and they impersonated his voice. There's so many different samplings of Marco Rubio's voice and text style and his cadence, and they were able to go ahead and spoof it on an app, and they targeted 3 foreign ministers, a US governor, and members of Congress. This is the Italian defense minister. They use an artificially generated voice used an artificial generated platform to mimic his voice. And what they did is they eventually said that, hey, I have money. We're trying to get these journalists that have been kidnapped released. I can't use funds from the ministry. But as soon as, we get the money, I'll be able to pay you back. And they targeted a lot of high profile businessmen and women within that realm. And lastly, this is something that hit very close to home. And this is something where it wasn't quite a high profile crime. But what happened was an athletic director cloned the principal's voice and circulated a recording that went viral. And it made the principal say a lot of heinous things, a lot of, racist things, and it caused a lot of outcry within the community. And there was, a lot of protests, and given everything that's going on in our country, this is a good look at how these deepfakes can really highlight racial tension. So before I play this, I want to be clear, this is the actual recording. So it is a little pointed. There's definitely some very charged things saying. So if you're offended, maybe tune out for a minute. But I wanted to show exactly what was played and what was said.
I seriously don't understand why I have to constantly put up with these dumbasses here every day. Between these ungrateful black kids who can't test their way out of a paper bag, or these teachers who don't get it, how hard is it to get these students to meet their grade level expectations? Lawrence and Ravenel should have never been hired. And don't let me get started on DJ. I'm going to drag his black ass out of here one way or another. I'm going to get such a stick. I'm just so sick of the inadequacies of these people. And if I have to get one more complaint from one more Jew in this community, I'm going to join the other side. Kathy, I'm done.
So again, that was very, very pointed. And it was something that when we get into the section later, we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the cadence and some of the pacing things that you can tell, even listening to it, that you'll be able to pick up on.
So Jared, let me ask you this. So this was the athletic director cloning the principal's voice for some reason. He wanted to get him in trouble or something, right? So
that's correct.
And then he got 4 months for this.
But that was after like an entire year. So this thing went on, probably for an entire year in the community. So the 4 months in jail was a plea resolution, but the disruption that it took to the community was probably an entire year.
Oh gosh. Okay. Just wanted to get some clarity. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. So the psychology of the attacks. The reason why I bring these up, these are all very big hit, grand things that happen and create a giant spectacle, right? So if you take a look at what happened in the Louvre recently, if any of you were following that, where the Louvre got burglarized, those type of attacks are very, very high profile, big emotional triggers, large sums at stake. And it's not the reality of what we're normally seeing. And the reason why I say that is, and this is where, we're going to kind of take a minute from deepfakes and talk about the reality. So often I ask the audience what they think the most dangerous animal in Africa is. And you get different comments and different thoughts, hippos, lions, snakes. And the reality is, if you look at mosquitoes are what actually kill most people worldwide. And I bring this up because the reality of scams is going to be this. You're going to see something like this. It's going to be phishing. It's going to be social engineering without the theatrics. And these get more people than anything else. So again, Coinbase maybe had its API hacked. It gets all that data, that PII data leaked, and then people start phishing with it. And then you get a text like this and you click on it, right? This is one that almost got me. This is one that I thought was kind of humorous. But that's kind of the reality of it. So we're talking about deepfakes. They obviously have a giant impact and swath, but it's the small traditional ones that are doing the most damage in reality. So through this, we're going to talk about some programs. Some you've probably heard of, some you have not, maybe. There's also a lot of foreign LLMs and AI generation tools out there. So we're going to talk about some of those too. This is not meant to be a comprehensive list, but these are some of the biggest ones. So this is Flux. Flux is definitely one of the best ones for generating humans and creates a very, very realistic approach, especially if the user has some skill behind it. So again, none of these are real. The woman it's based on is not real. This is a completely AI generated photograph. So this is Sora 2. This came out last year. And the reason why I show this one, it shows a spoofed body cam image that looks very, very accurate. So if you've looked at a lot of body worn camera footage, you'll notice it has the same kind of fish bubble, very, very compelling. So this is where we're at now. This is Sora 2, which came out about a month ago. And this has been a marked improvement upon the original Sora. So if you're looking at this, there was a trend where they were sending out a ton of body-worn camera police videos. And if you take a look in the upper right-hand corner, it's even mimicking a date and time and a watermark for Axon body cameras as well.
Evening. You know why I pulled you over? Is that a chimp? Sir? Step out of the vehicle for me. All right, hands off the wheel, buddy. Hey, stop the car. Dispatch, driver just fled. It's a chimpanzee. Repeat, chimp driver right away.
It's ridiculous, and there's some very, very good ones going on out there with them. There's Mario. You'll see this. If you'll take a peek, you'll notice that 2 of those little Sora cloud bubbles popped up to kind of give it a watermark from the producer. But the reality is it's very, very easy to remove those. So there was a knife attack recently in the UK, and there's been a ton of fake videos circulating that have been actually making major news media outlets as being part of, the body-worn camera videos of the incident, and it's completely AI generated. So the reality is that a study done by iProve, a UK-based security company, is saying less than 1% people can identify a deepfake. And if you're on social media and you're looking at this now, your feed is probably just completely inundated with often AI videos. And, when the wildfires came out in California, my grandmother kept sending me videos of firefighters rescuing, small animals. And it's clearly AI generated, but depending on your level of, observation, you may not notice it. So this is something that came out a year ago. This is Deep Live Cam. And the reason why I'm not actually showing this video is it's an open source tool, and we've come leaps and bounds from this currently. So what this will do is you can take a photo of somebody. In this case, they took JD Vance, and depending on the quality of your graphics card, you can mimic yourself to look like whoever you want. So the better the sampling, the better your graphics card, the more compelling and realistic it is, and it does it in real time. And again, this is completely open source. So if you want to go ahead and take a look at it for obviously just educational purposes or research purposes, here's the GitHub for it.
Let me ask you a quick question on that one, Jared. Sorry. On that last slide, let me just back us up real quick. So you're saying this is kind of like on Teams. I'm using a background, but in this case, it's actually putting it over my face, and I could be JD Vance. I could be you if I wanted, right? Is that what you're saying here? And then, so it's not affected by movement as much.
Oh, it'll absolutely. We'll show on the next one, because it's a better model with it. And I don't want to eat up all our time with the videos, but no, this model will actually do it real time, and he switches live. So you see him switch to JD Vance, Mark Zuckerberg, Hugh Grant, and it's pretty seamless. It doesn't do the voice, obviously, but there's other tools for voice modulation with that that are very compelling.
Excellent. Well, I will. I just got excited and I wanted to see it, so I'll let you go.
So showing the next one's actually very much an improvement on this. It's a paid tool, but it's very, very compelling. This is WAN 2.5. So this is a marked improvement over that. And again, this is a paid LLM at this point, but the ability, so we're going to take a look at a video. The gentleman in the lower left-hand corner is the actual subject, and the right is who he's mimicking himself to be. It's following his facial features. It's kind of scary because I've lived my life since the 90s that every person I talk to on the internet is a man, and this just kind of really drives that home on how realistic it looks and how seamless it appears. So we're going to talk about the other side of the deepfakes, ends up being the voice with it as well. So this is 11 Labs, and this is Cal. Cal was with me when we were teaching in Bangkok, and one of the things that I'll do is I'll go and I'll try and get enough voice sampling of somebody to clone their voice, right? And depending on the sampling, depending on the quality, you can make and create somebody's voice just from 2 or 3 minutes of sampling. Some people say 15 seconds, but the better the sampling, obviously Marco Rubio has a ton of voice samples out there. Cal doesn't have an online presence, so I had to actually get bits and pieces of it. But we played this in front of the class, and the reality is we could play it. There's just not a lot of sense in it just because you don't know what Cal sounds like. But it was compelling because even he wasn't sure. I had him read it one time, recording himself, and then the other time we created it. And it was hard to tell. He wasn't sure which one was the one he recorded and which was the clone version because it was that good. So 11 labs, it's got access across 70 languages. We can do voice design. We can do voice cloning and translation. And the big thing is it preserves speaker tone and timing, which is huge, no matter what language we're speaking in, across 32 languages for the voice control. It's got speech to text. It's got a fantastic voice isolator. So if you actually are recording something and want to clean it up, and the text to sound effects for creating that are also fantastic as well. And this is about $20 a month to do that. So here's kind of the fork in the road that we talk about. We've got observational skills and forensic guidance, and this kind of tackles the two problems we have. So on one hand, we have observational skills where the issue ends up being, we're susceptible, everyone is susceptible to propaganda, and its use in propaganda, in spoofing crimes, in spoofing, really convincing deepfake and frauds is on one hand. And on the other hand, we're dealing with admission into court, right? So how we verify an image in court, because for a lot of lawyers, this is a very, very scary thing. And I'll tell you that forensically, we're in a very good place. But the observational skills, depending on who's actually observing, can be very, very challenging. So the methodology, this is from guidance out, forensic lab manager named Chris Kelly out in Boston, Massachusetts. He kind of talks about this, but we go from observations into forensics. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with the observational skills we're going to go over, and we're going to move into forensics after that. So we're going to take a look at the video. We're going to go ahead and isolate our senses. So what I might do is turn the audio off and just watch the video. I might watch the video and just listen to the audio. We're going to play it backwards. We're going to take a look at where this artifact came from and the context in which it was introduced in court. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the metadata, which, if you don't know, is just data about data. And then we're going to briefly touch on some automated forensics tools and the dangers of over-reliance on them. So the observational skills, these have changed from the first time I've spoken on it. And everything in here, kind of the gold standard right now, and the one I'm seeing the most of is for Sora 2. So all the observational skills we're going to talk about, I've seen inside Sora 2 generated videos. So the first one is the eyes, right? And most of these tells are going to revolve around the rendering and the graphical power it takes to create these images. So why it's hard, they're reflective, they're wet, they're constantly moving, and there's so much depth into the eye. So some giveaways, you might see one eye slightly larger than the other. You might see a slight misshapen. You might see a misaligned gaze. So I'll see in a lot of Sora videos, if it looks at the camera, it's not really looking at the camera. There's a slight far off look in their eyes. Inconsistent catch light, which lighting is a big, big tell in some of these AI videos. And then dead eyes, right? So moving into this, if we take a look on the gentleman on the left, it is very much kind of looks a little bit waxy, like a museum kind of look onto him, right? The middle gentleman you'll see right here, it's underdeveloped. So all that rendering went to everything else in the room. But when we actually take a closer look at the eyes, you can actually see that it hasn't quite been finished. or it's too much. So if we take a look on the gentleman on the far right, it looks like something at a Terminator. His eyes are almost too clear, too shiny, almost robot-like, right? It's very hard to get these just right. Teeth. Another one we'll talk about is teeth. They're small, repetitive. Everyone's teeth are different. So again, if you're a celebrity and you have constant videos of your teeth out there, it's really hard to make sure all of them are completely accurate. So giveaways, we'll see some tooth blobs. Sometimes it'll render just for a moment and it'll create kind of a blob in the teeth, a white strip with no separation. Too many teeth, uneven count or irregular spacing, and then some gum line errors. And it's really, really evident in video when it's playing if you break it down frame by frame. So here's some good examples. The one on the bottom left, you can tell is a very clear tooth blob. Like it definitely is incorrect on the amount of teeth and where they should be in the mouth. He's almost got like a center tooth. On the bottom right, you can see that one tooth is definitely larger than the other. But if you're watching this on a video, you might not catch it if you're just watching without paying attention. Hands. So I included the six finger. This is the one that in my opinion has gotten so good. You're not seeing six fingers anymore. And if you do, it's a really bad graphics card, but you'll still see them sometimes awkwardly bent at a wrong angle. You'll still see, even in Sora 2, I've seen a few where the wrist moves in a way that's completely against the laws of physics. Big thing is if you see tattoos on hands or jewelry, AI still has a very, very challenging time trying to render that jewelry or those tattoos correctly. So this is a good photo of Obama, but if you take a look at the finger, you know, it gets mixed up on which finger was supposed to be pointing downward at that angle. So it ends up looking like a broken finger. There's also, if you take a quick look, that desk, it's at a different where his elbow is. The desk sinks down below and creates another false ledge. But it's actually a very good AI generated photo at that point. Earrings and jewelry, especially depending on how many someone has on them, it's the same problem we're running into with jewelry across, is that asymmetry, one is missing or one looks different. Sometimes you'll see it'll get caught in the hair, and not like actually caught, but the rendering will get stuck in the hair. And then that inconsistent reflection and shadowing, which is the biggest tells we're running into now. So in this case, we're taking a look at it, and it is nonsensical how those are plugged into her ear. So if we're looking at the photo in and of itself, you know, there's blemishes, you know, the eyes are actually very well done. You can see some redness. It looks very, very good. But when we pay attention and we start taking a look into those earrings, it's nonsensical. And again, all that rendering, that focus, it's almost like a magic trick, right? Where what the focus of the video is, sometimes it doesn't render the parts it doesn't think are as important. Glasses, and again, you'll notice there's a lot of jewelry. Anytime we're adding jewelry into the mix, it has to stick to the laws of physics by the face, by the hands, by the fear, and it makes some challenging issues. So glasses are especially hard because we've got reflective surfaces. We've got very fixed geometry on glasses. So sometimes you'll see the frames bending into the skin or hovering slightly away. You'll get asymmetrical lens shapes. And if you pay attention to the arms, it'll warp at the temples, like it'll bend into it as the AI is trying to generate, you know, the images itself. So this is a snip from a video, and you can tell just the size of the lens on his left eye, the right, it extended trying to render. So shadows and light tend to be the two biggest tells I'm seeing now. So they're hard because it demands constant geometry and light physics. So the model has to calculate direction, it has to calculate shape. And if there's multiple light sources, it becomes even more challenging. So You'll get shadows pointing in different directions. Sometimes the edges of the shadows are too hard or too soft compared to the light source. Shadows where objects should block light. So this is Light Touch by Adobe. So the Adobe Creative Suite has a lot of really, really powerful AI augmented tools in it. It definitely seems to be kind of the choice for creating and editing videos.
Which means I can move the light around so you can
Wow, no way! No way, no way, no way.
No way. I don't understand.
the favorite part of this show is this. I'll put the light here and slowly push it.
No!
So this tool, it's able to go ahead and render a light source, but in reality, even as I'm sitting here in my office, I'm looking and there's at least 3 or 4 light sources. So being able to do it with one light source is fantastic, but as we enter more and more equations into it, and sometimes you'll catch yourself looking at these videos and you can't quite determine what's off about it, but you can see something is. So this is definitely one of the best deep fakes I've seen. And it's interesting because if you look at the mirror, and if you have kids, I'm sure the mirror looks familiar, but all of that dust and, spit on the mirror has been rendered to show it looking real, right? And I started looking at this photo, and I'm looking at the background, because sometimes it'll make nonsensical things in the background, but all the background makes sense. All of the clothes make sense. And I did a little bit of mimicking with it, and the flash created such a powerful backwash that it didn't match the back end. And after looking at this thing probably for another 10 minutes, I realized that the Apple logo, the word Apple that's supposed to be below it, was nonsensical, and that's another obvious tell with it. But this is a fantastic example of how good it's getting. So convergence lines, and this is kind of a lesser known one. If you look at a room and it's drawn or written poorly, you'll notice it. So it's hard because all of these things, all of these images have to be governed by physics and geometry. So in this case, when they teach people how to draw, what they really focus on is convergence lines. These lines go ahead and meet at a point, and that's where it vanishes into it, and it gives perspective on the drawing. So the giveaways, copy and paste perspective, horizon eye level errors, you'll see different vanishing points on a single object. And again, sometimes looking at this, you'll see it and you'll be like, there's something off, but I can't quite figure out what's going on with it. It's often the convergence line. So we'll take a look at, in theory, what it looks like is this. So when we're drawing, you notice the railroad, all of those things go to a common point. There's a horizon line, and it's all moving in one direction, and it looks like it's obeying the laws of physics, right? So when we take a look at a photo, and this is an actual photo, and then we go ahead and add some convergence lines over it, we can see that it's obeying the laws of physics, right? Everything is kind of converging in on a point. So this is AI generated. And if we take a look at it, when I first saw this, it was a very simple room and there was something off about it and I couldn't quite place it, right? So when we add some convergence lines over it, you can see it doesn't make sense. The bottom does not match the top as far as where it's supposed to be converging. So it actually has 2 vanishing points if we keep drawing those 2 lines out. This is another one, even as good as it's getting, and mixing audio and the video together is probably the biggest tell I'm seeing now, because there's some really, really fantastic tools out there for lip syncing videos, and we'll talk about Lip Sync 2 Pro. But human speech is complex. We're going to talk about just the audio for right now. So we've got vocal cords, we've got nasal resonances, we've got breathing, we've got timing and cadence. So some giveaways, you'll see a lack of breath, unnatural or perfectly timed breath, overly smooth plosives, talking about the B's and P's, without any sort of microphone pop. The robotic cadence that was, if we listen to that first audio that we heard with the high school, it was very robotic in the cadence. The pacing was flat. It was very, his voice inflected, but the pacing maintained the same. So glitches and warbles in syllables. And again, dead silence between words because these are often trained on stereo quality sound. So we'll take a look at this and we'll talk about this, and then we're going to actually play a video. So when we look at how people pronounce words, this is a general rule of what happens with it. So consonants, vowels, they're all very much a common way of seeing it. And Dr. Henry Farid, he's basically a professor out of Berkeley, California. Guy does some fantastic research on digital forensics and this. So if you're interested in following more of this, I would highly suggest following him on LinkedIn or online and looking up some of his articles. Absolutely fascinating individual. But these slides I got from him, this is Obama's mouth. And again, looking at how and thinking about how you pronounce these words shows what the lips are supposed to look like. So we're going to go ahead and play a video, and we're going to put those at the bottom. We're not going to play the full video only because it's a little long. Okay, sharing the screen. This is Lip Sync 2 Pro. This is just their ad demo. So pay attention to the mouths. You'll notice the audio is consistent, but the people saying it are inconsistent.
Telling the perfect story shouldn't take more than one shot. It should just work. Doesn't matter who you are, where you are facing, what you look like. It should just work.
So as good as it is, you'll notice a lot of times, especially on the plosives, she isn't touching her mouth together. It's gotten very good yet, but it's not quite perfect yet. So it's gotten very, very, very good. But again, going back to it, and if we look at it, there's still some problems, especially with the M, the B's, and the P's, and just some slight cadence. So if you're not paying attention, you might miss that. But now that you see it, you look at a lot of AI generated video and it really pops out at you. So now we'll move into forensic guidance. And this is a little more difficult. If you have a background into forensics, into cybersecurity, some of this might be old hat. This is Edmund Locard. His big thing, he basically invented fingerprinting, and he was a French criminologist from 1877 to 1966. And the big thing he said is every contact leaves a trace. So when we're talking about modern forensics and we're talking about physical forensics, if a suspect goes onto a scene, there's a good chance his fibers on his clothing, might be left at the scene, hair might be left, DNA. It's the same thing in digital forensics, where we can't go into a computer system without leaving some sort of trace, whether it's in the registry, whether it's metadata alteration, and depending on how skilled an adversary is, those footprints might be very small or they might be very, very big. So this is where we talk about taking a look at the artifact in its totality. So can other evidence be obtained to prove it? If I'm listening to a recording, is there a call in the call logs that match it, right? Is there geolocation to confirm that this person and that person were together? Are there phone records, right? Chain of custody information, where I got an artifact or a piece of digital evidence from, is crucial in supporting and challenging. And again, how is it maintained? And we're going to look at that metadata that we talked about. So here's a pic from an Apple iPhone. This sits above the lab door in my office. And it's a badge from DEF CON. We take a look at the photo and you can see reflection in the sides. And we have just what looks to be a very clean, obvious picture that's very real, right? But we're just going to go ahead and look at the metadata in this case. So we've got a size to it. We've got a name, which is obviously very long. And we've got an MD5 hash. This was just created from running this artifact through an algorithm and generating this digital fingerprint, which is just what a hash is. So when we take a look at the EXIF data using a tool called EXIF tool, we can say, hey, this was an Apple computer incorporated profile creator. It was obviously taken by Apple because it was an Apple photo. And the size is one thing to note too, because we're going to go ahead and compare that with the next couple. So then we're going to take that photo and we're going to do a screenshot. And the first thing we'll notice is, number one, the size just got halved. It's a smaller photo and it's halved. And if we take a look at the hash value, it is completely different. If we change one single bit of data in that picture, it generates a completely new hash value, a completely new fingerprint. It's not going to be just off by a digit. It's going to be completely off, right? But if we look into that EXIF data, we're not really getting anything about what created and how it was. So that's not to say that a screenshot isn't admissible in court, but we have to be clear that, hey, this is a screenshot. There's going to be some data missing from it. How did we get that? Meaning, did somebody take a screenshot, send it in a text message, and now I kind of have to follow that chain of where it got to and how it got into that phone? It kind of depends. So now we're going to take a look at a very clearly AI-generated image. And the first thing we'll notice, it's bigger than both of the files together, and the hash is completely different. So if we're looking at an actual photo downloaded from ChatGPT, it's going to look like this. And we run it through that EXIF tool. It'll say, hey, it was created by ChatGPT 4.0 using OpenAI. It labeled it this, which was a different label than the phone labeled it. And it's, again, very, very clearly AI generated. But the big thing I want to focus on here is that the size is a bigger size. And again, if we took a screenshot of it now, it's going to go ahead and create and have that size and have all that. So now we're looking back at no EXIF data and a smaller size, and it's a screenshot. So there is guidance on it. This is the Scientific Working Group on Digital Evidence. Anything revolving around forensics and digital forensics, these guys are a major player in what policy looks like, and they give it for everything: video authentication, audio authentication. And in this case, it's 15 pages, but we're just going to kind of condense it down into some stuff we've already done. So the first takeaway is that the scene physics are red flags. So all of those observational skills we had talked about, all of those are in play here, and just making sure that the laws of physics are being obeyed. Then we're going to take a look at container versus content. When we look at a video, we got to look at two different things. So essentially, there's all these things called a group of pictures inside, and it's wrapped in a container. So we're going to take a look at the container, and then we're going to take a look at the actual content of that container, global versus local analysis. Photo response and non-uniformity, that's a little bit more in depth for the scope of this presentation. And then we're going to go take a look at playback manipulation. We're going to play it forward, we're going to play it backwards, we're going to slow it down, we're going to look at things frame by frame. So this is high efficiency video coding. This is what your phone uses to take pictures. And what it is, if we take a look at the first frame on the bottom, this is called an iframe, right? The frames following are B and P frames until we hit another iframe. So an iframe has everything in that image together, right? So it is essentially an entire photo of what's going on in that. If we look at the bottom, those P frames, those are going to be just what changes. So we're looking at my stick figures up top, and only the arm is moving. So those B and P frames are just going to show that arm. And what it does is, this is why you have a smaller file size, because we're not having to take all that data of basically duplicating all the things that didn't move and making this one giant image. There's a lot of codecs that actually still have all the iframes, but specifically for your phone, it's going to be a mix of I and B and P. So this one's a little bit easier to explain it. So we've got the definitions of I, P, and B frames, as well as the structure of what we're going to see on the video. So if we're looking at an AI and we have this little stick man running from the tree, we're going to see the tree and the man moving every single time. If we're taking a look at an iPhone 7 Plus, because the tree's not moving, well, now that tree's not going to show in those P and B frames, if that makes sense. This is a comparison chart. If you're curious just of what uses it and how AI compares across, if we take a look at the Pro resolution, you know, it does match it a lot of the all iframes, but you're going to see some big inconsistencies across it when we're looking at it forensically. So this is where it gets really interesting. So researchers are able to bypass deepfake detection with what's called replay attacks. So what they're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take an AI recording, and then we're going to go ahead and go into Adobe, and we're going to lace it with background noise, right? Maybe it's a car, maybe it's, you know, a fan. And when we're relying on these automated tools, you know, it's fooling automated tools very easily. And this is when we'll see it like real speech. There's all that background noise, all of that on top of it. And when we have fake speech, you're going to have those gaps that we were talking about, all that bits and pieces in the air that you're not hearing, right? So, and again, the big thing is it works on most detectors are trained on clean, closed mic recordings. And again, could it get better in the future? Absolutely. Again, everything we're talking about is useful right now. And where this is going, it's getting harder and harder and harder to tell. So some resources. Again, I mentioned Hani Farid. He's a professor at UC Berkeley. He is fantastic. Deepfake and media forensics, status and future challenges. This was an article that I found absolutely invaluable in talking about this, especially talking about how it's designing and developing AI-generated images. And again, that scientific working group on digital evidence, if you're in that realm and are trying to authenticate those two artifacts. These are two of the biggest automated solutions that we're looking at now. Magnet and Cellbrite are kind of the two big kings of forensics. And AMP software is definitely marketed to try and help authenticate video and audio. So this is what I use personally. And again, just to be absolutely clear, this is not endorsed by the Secret Service. This is just things I use and things I pay for on my own and kind of the reason why I do below it. So there's some free tools for examining metadata. So Irfan Viewer is fantastic. 7-Zip, I can't recommend that enough. That's fantastic for zipping and compressing tools. FMeg is great for video analysis, and XF Tool is another great free one. But again, there's some very, very powerful tools out there, and you can spend a lot of money, you know, if you want to get some of their Pro Max accounts as well. And at this time, we would take questions if there was any.
I have a million questions, Jared. I mean, we could do like an hour with just the questions I have from what I just
so I actually cut this down, Tom. Yeah.
That was great.
I'm developing another one where we're talking about how it's generated. Basically what they do is, and it's a really fascinating topic, and it's definitely, I wish we could have got into it more. But basically, they use these LLMs. One of them creates images, and the other one tries to tell if they're fake. And so they're both challenging each other and trying to get better and better about creating it and detecting it. And that's the status of it. So AI is definitely, you know, light speed with it now.
Yeah, I think that's your next session in the spring when we see you again. I hope.
I think I would love to. Like I say, I've always had a good time working with you guys.
Yeah, this is great. This is awesome. If you guys need help out there in the audience, reach out to somebody in the Secret Service. These guys don't just protect our important people. One of their tasks was to protect our money, and that is digital now. So that's why we're hearing from these folks, right? So just to throw that out there in case you're wondering why I've got a Secret Service guy on here and all that. But thank you, sir. This has been awesome. I can't thank you guys enough for what you guys do. So thank you for enlightening us. This is by far, I'm going to be honest, and somebody can call me out on this later, but this was one of the sessions I was waiting for to see today. So I appreciate you delivering it for us, because I think this is going to help folks quite a bit. I play around with a lot of the tools myself too. So it was enlightening to see some of the other ones that are out there. So thank you, sir. Everybody out in the audience, we've got a break coming up and then more sessions on the way. So drop something in the chat. If you like this kind of content, I'll get more of it. So throw something in the chat for us. We'll see, hopefully, Jared, at future virtual conferences. He's in the Denver neighborhood, so if you're in that area, you can probably maybe meet him one day. But thank you, sir. We'll get everybody to a break and
absolutely
enjoy the rest of the conference.